Hey Dylan, how's it going?
It's going great, man. How are you?
Great, great. We were talking before we recorded about kind of what your experiences have been, and I think this is going to be a awesome interview. So I'm excited. So
Yeah, I'm excited too. I mean, it just like looking at what your mission is, I think is super important because the trades are such an overlooked not only opportunity, but wealth creation vehicle.
hmm
A lot of people say like I gotta go climb the corporate ladder, but you have people who are really artists at what they do, and it's a super valuable thing that's very difficult to automate. And I think as we go forward in the future, we're gonna see the trades really have a great renaissance, and I think you're right on the front of it.
that's the whole purpose here. There's so many people being laid off in tech fields, and a lot of people worried about AI taking over their jobs, but the trade industry is probably one of the last places where you'll see widespread job replacement, if any. So that's the goal here. Let's push
Totally.
people. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do
So
currently.
current in my current incarnation, I am a CPA and internal auditor for a power utility. So I started out. I used to be a math teacher. I taught for many years until that went south, and then went into the accounting field. As part of that, just kind of I did a complete reinvention of my life over the course of 2 years. And with that, I had a lot of men specifically, but women too, that started asking me, "Hey, how did you do that?" And
Mhm.
so I started a financial coaching practice where I help people, take control of their financial life and live free so they can create their financial visions, a battle plan in order to be able to bring that into reality. And then, of course, how to manage their money and have those deep conversations about it. Um, as they continue to build wealth, so they don't fall into the same patterns that maybe put them in a bad situation prior.
hmm Super important. Money management and mismanagement is a huge problem that a lot of people don't want to talk about at all.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Well, a big part of like the practice is looking at the idea that like money is emotional. And at the
mhm.
end of the day, we want to believe that money is spreadsheets, and we want to believe that it's, good calculations, and it's this entire like intellectual cerebral endeavor. And it's not. People make their money decisions with their heart. That's the end. How they manage it, how they invest in themselves, that's all heart-based decisions.
Mhm.
And so, like in my practice, I get people who will tell me far more about their bedroom issues faster than they'll tell me about their money issues. And this is literally what I do for a living.
That was something that blew my mind when I first met you. You were talking about what you do, and you were kind of doing a little bit of relationship coaching because of your background doing money management. It almost always comes down to a relationship problem, which really opened my thinking to where it really just surprised me, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're not set up like there's nothing in our evolutionary history that's going to set us up and say, like, oh, I'm really good at spreadsheets, right? Like
hmm
our whole thing was to stay ahead of the puma, make more babies, keep ourselves fed. That's about it.
hmm
And when people start to work with their money, because we tie money to resources, that means it's a very core part of our survival. So
hmm
when you have things like budgets aren't a statement of restrictions, and they're not a spreadsheet. They're a conversation and a statement of your values. So particularly with couples, when you are sitting down with your partner and having a conversation, a business meeting, not a check-in, a business meeting where you're actually sharing, here's what our income is, here's what our expenses are, we're spending in line with our values. That is an intimate experience. And you will find that there's a lot of triggers from scarcity mindsets, old wounds that are going to come out in that conversation.
hmm
And it's intense because I get couples who come in and they're working with things, and they start telling me like, well, she said the same thing, the other day in the bedroom. Where did
hmm
that come from? Well, because we're already in an intimate state, right?
Yep.
We're already in an open state. The skeletons are already out of the closet. So what's one more? And
hmm
so I've never had a couple that's come through the financial coaching practice where we have not had a long conversation about their communication with each other, their values, their vision, both for themselves and for their marriage. It
hmm
is an incredible thing because when you touch on people's money issues, you touch on their everything.
hmm Super huge. we talked a little bit about how, I mean, money is it's such a weird thing to think about because we're changing our time, exchanging our time for a piece of paper. And it's kind of lost in translation as to how to manage this. And it shows in even how people run businesses, where we talked a little bit before. I think it's 90% of small businesses within 5 years fail, and many of them it's because of financial mismanagement. Um, and I think that's especially in trades. Um, a lot of people it's hard to keep going on your jobs and doing your craft, but then worrying about, getting invoices and bills and worrying about that money side.
Totally. And, some background for your listeners, I grew up in a blue collar trades family.
Mhm.
And, that's what I did. My very first job was when I was 14 years old. They put, 4 cubic yards of 2 stone in the front yard, handed me a shovel and a wheelbarrow and said, go fill the front porch of this house. And that was my job interview that got me on the cruise, learning how to do trades, because the
Mhm.
whole idea was, can Dylan work without supervision all day long? Turns out I could. And therefore I ended up doing a lot of stick built homes. And so like, that's part of the family. And I always think of my uncle, and he's the guy in my head whenever I'm measuring something or working on a project. Like, he's the one in my head who's always checking my work. And I think we all have had those mentors as we go through life. And he
Mhm.
was an artist. And he was absolutely brilliant at doing plaster work and drywall and designing. Like, he could design houses that were very human scale, human focuses. The problem
Mhm.
was that artistry did not translate into invoices and
Yep.
spreadsheets and budgets and tools and employees and payroll and all that other stuff. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make, particularly when it's in the trades, but it's particularly in any field where you
Yeah.
have expertise, is the
Mhm.
trap of thinking, I'm good at this, therefore I'll be good at these other things too. And
Mhm.
it's just simply not true. So when people are going into any type of endeavor with small businesses, you're 100% right. 90% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years, not because they weren't good at the business part, but because they weren't, I mean, whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's a
Mhm.
bakery, trades,
Yep.
electrical, what have
Yep.
you, but it's the arts and crafts of the business that they don't know, but more critically, they don't ask for help.
Mhm.
And so that's a big part. That was really actually how I ended up in accounting. Was I was doing small business accounting on the side when I was a teacher,
Mhm.
helping people who were opening restaurants, doing flip strategies for rental properties around Flagstaff, those types of things.
Yep. Yeah. Well, there's something to be said about being able to manage your money and being able to, I mean, you don't necessarily need to be your own accountant as a small business owner, but you need to have a good understanding of all of the money aspects. My dad always told me that when he was going through high school that he thought he was going to be an accountant. He took accounting classes and stuff like that, and that's what his aptitudes showed. He ended up working for his uncles doing concrete and just stayed in it. But the accounting, he always tells me, was one of the biggest contributors to his success as a business owner. Where, like in 2008, a lot of people went down with the economy. My dad pulled through, and I think most of the people that did had their money under control, and they had
Totally.
some sort of a plan. What I mean, what advice do you have for people in that situation? I mean, ask for help, get help, learn, where to learn, that sort of thing.
Totally. The arts and crafts for a lot of tradespeople are very similar to a lot of other businesses,
Mhm.
right? The first thing is you have to know what you do. Like,
Yeah.
what's the problem you're solving? So you look at myself, right? I grew up in the trades. I eventually went to college because that's what everyone told me to do.
Mhm.
But I'm exceedingly handy. So when I bought my house, I did a lot of the work, and I got to a point where like my time doing the plumbing was not as valuable as my time doing something else.
Yeah.
So, I was 40 years old before I hired my first plumber.
Mhm.
And why did I hire that plumber? Why that one plumber? Well, because he came up first in the Google search.
Mhm.
So like they knew what they were doing in terms of like, we are plumbers and we take this off your plate. They were well marketed, right? They had a way to get to me. So when I
Mhm.
went looking for a plumber, I found them and not somebody else.
Mhm.
And thirdly, their invoices were great. Like, the guy comes out, he has an iPad. There's a contract, exactly what he told me he was going to do. The prices were all there. I signed, put the credit card in. I was done. I never had to do anything more as the person who hired him. So that type of service, I've used them over and over and over again because they have a very clear vision of what they do and
Mm,
what value they add to me. They're not the cheapest.
yeah.
They're actually quite expensive, but I'll
Mm,
pay for it because it's so easy to work with them. So when you're looking at it and you're saying, well, I'm in the trades, I want to be in the business for myself. What do you do? And
mm,
how do you do it? And how do people know about it?
mm.
Those are the first three things you have to know.
Yep, you have to. You have to have some sort of either have been doing outreach already and have people know who you are, or you really got to put a lot of effort into it because otherwise, I mean, who's gonna go work with you if there's somebody else that's more convenient and more well known that can come out with an iPad like that and just, here you go. This is it.
Totally. Well, I
Yep.
mean, just stop and think about it like in concrete, right?
Mm,
If I go, what's everyone's first step? They Google it,
mhm.
right? So they Google it, they go see it, and then what's the like secondary concern for everybody who hires a tradesman? That you're going to get ripped off,
Yeah.
right? This is why people don't trust doctors, because there's an information asymmetry. The doctor knows something that you don't, and so you're always afraid that they're going to give you a drug or they're going to order a test they're just collecting a paycheck. Well,
Yeah.
let's be honest, the trades do this too, right? Accountants do this, finance
Mhm.
guys do, everybody does this. So they're afraid to be ripped off when you come out for the concrete work. But if you've
Mhm.
got a website that's got smiley faces going, that guy was the best guy. I
Yeah.
felt so comfortable,
Mhm.
or even he made a mistake and then he made it right because he stood behind his work. Like already by the time I'm picking up the phone, I'm already sold.
Mhm.
Right. So when you present to me, like, and stop and think about it from the business owner standpoint, we always are afraid when we, present our invoice, they're not going to want to pay it and they're going to nickel and dime us and they're going to
Yeah.
argue. But if you've already have that social capital because you have a good community, you know what you do, you know how you do it, you know how people can find you, right? They can
Mhm.
come in, they see smiling faces with the testimonial, you've already convinced them.
Yeah. It's true. If you're not out there, or it's like most of the time people rely on word of mouth, and they'll get that in some way from somebody else referring you, but that only takes you so far. I mean, it takes a very, very long time to build a business that way. And obviously there are many people that are successful, which is probably where the disconnect comes in, where it's like, well, why would I need that? I know people that have done it without it, and it you can, but it still comes down to who do you know, and then do you have a plan on how to get these services out to them.
Totally.
So it's yep.
Well, I mean, how many times have you hired a contractor in which the guy shows up and he doesn't have his tools?
Yeah.
Right? Or a guy shows up or he shows up late, or he shows up on
Mm-hmm.
a different day because another job paid him more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like these are things that I saw all the time. But there is a certain aspect to all of that. I think one
Mm-hmm.
other thing that's worth talking about though is like when you're starting that business and you're learning how to manage money.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said was, well, I exchanged my time for a piece of paper.
Yep.
And I'm going to push back on that and say, no, you don't. You exchange your time for potential because that's what money is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hand that money, and this is so true for small business owners,
Mm-hmm.
they can, once they get to a point where they can visualize this, and then they're at the hardware store, they want to buy all the new tools. Well, do you need the new tools? Maybe, I don't know. But being able to handle that level of potential, and that's true with the website too. I think that there's a lot of guys who will buy, they'll buy the tools, they'll buy the truck, but they don't buy the web portal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't buy the other tools of the business, not necessarily the trade.
Yeah. Well, this is where a lot of disconnect comes in, where the online stuff isn't seen how it should be. It is a tool. Social media is a tool, even though a lot of people get sucked into scrolling on their phone all day. They're just using the tool improperly. If you get on social media and you're posting every single day and posting your reviews and posting your interactions with people and your work and all of that, I mean, if someone goes to your page and they're already convinced to work with you, it's really hard to screw up the sale at that point. It just accentuates the social capital, but it is a tool, like you say. So,
Totally.
and people just don't want to invest in that because they're not maybe looking at it in the right light, I guess.
Well, and the other, so you made a great point of by the time they get to your site, the sale's already made. So my
Mm,
question is it easy to give you money on your website? And that's a question where a lot of people, and this is universal, not just trades, but I know trades, right?
mm,
You're proud of what you do.
mm,
You build the infrastructure by which all of Western civilization is based.
mm,
Without the trades, we're nothing. And
mm,
that's just a reality. So of course they're proud to show you that kitchen they did that they're really proud of, or their tile work. Honestly, by the time I'm on your website, I'm already sold on that. Like, where's the button to schedule?
mm,
What's the bare minimum that of information you need to get going?
mm,
Because once I'm convinced I want you to do my concrete work or you to do my tile work, what's the next thing? How soon can you get it done?
mm,
So is the website designed to sell, or is
mm.
it designed for they can give you money?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, you have to have kind of both, but you definitely have to have that ability to convert and that ability to reach out. But I mean, a little pushback I hear from contractors and tradespeople is, oh, well, I don't want all of the phone calls. Some people might see your site and be sold, but they'll call with maybe questions, or maybe they just want to call you and get in touch with you. But that alone kind of is a little bit of a barrier to a lot of small business owners, because it's just a whole nother step that takes time out of their day. So I always tell people to have a way, like you say, like get on schedule, but you got to use these tools right. So like if you use them right, you can set time aside to handle this stuff, and you don't have to be answering phone calls all the time, or
Totally.
automate the process. So when they reach out to you and schedule, you can have emails or text messages or something, you know, saying, oh, hey, here's some information about this, here's some information about that, and anything along those lines that can kind of take away that uncomfortable phone call with all the questions. You know what I mean?
Totally. And you don't want to be halfway through your day and you get some guy who wants to call you up, because that's never a short phone call, right?
No.
But stop and think about this, right? There, as a tradesperson, you're an artist.
Mm,
you're the master of that one thing. There are people in the web space that are the trade equivalent.
mm,
And I got a new website that's coming, and I hired a man who's like, oh, he is very much on board with that.
mm,
He's very tuned into it. So when I had the same concern, his thing was, then don't give him your phone number.
yeah.
She's like, you can do this one of two ways. You can either create a form that's going to ask them questions to get them to think
Yep.
ahead of time, and then they fill that out and it goes to your email box, and then you have to set aside time to get back to them,
Mm,
right? Or you can just have them schedule the appointment, which is how my website is set up. If you
yep.
go to fiscallysavage.com, find where you can schedule,
Mm,
right? It's just my Calendly link. It shows
mm,
all of my available times. You click on it, and we've set up a Zoom meeting. It goes right to our calendar. I have never had someone cold call me, and yet my business is growing because people have access to me at times I've set aside.
yep.
And of course, that's a conversation that I've had to have with my wife and kids, because I'm working full time and I'm bootstrapping a secondary business,
Mm,
and I have duties as a husband and a father.
mm,
So, having those clear delineations of time and being able to use the tools available to me has opened up more time for everybody.
mm.
It's not chaos, it's actually heavily controlled.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I see is people are running around like with chickens with their heads cut off, answering phone calls, doing invoices, going and checking on jobs, doing all that stuff. If you have even a tiny bit more structure, and this is where technology really comes into play, because you can have a form on your website that even qualifies a client to be a client. If there's a certain level of job that you don't want to take on, you can have them put their project information in, and it will say, oh, sorry, this isn't really in our sphere of what we do. And you can maybe even refer to somebody else. And
Totally.
this is something that, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to get all of the phone calls for all of the little homeowner, like, side projects, and I just want to get the big jobs type stuff. And it's like there's a point where you saying no to stuff you don't want to do is fine and all, but you can have people qualify themselves before they even talk to you,
Totally.
which is insane that people are sleeping on this benefit, I think.
Totally. But again, it goes back to get real clear on what you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if everybody is, competing for the big tile projects, right? We want to tile an entire kitchen or whatever. It's been a long time since I've swung a hammer. So pardon me if I misstep here.
Yeah.
But and people are saying, I don't want to take those those small homeowners. Well, hold on a second. They just want something done quickly and done right, and they're willing to pay for it. That's a market. That's a niche market. And so if you're able to get 6 or 7 of those jobs and you're able to charge a premium because you're the guy who answers the phone and shows up on time, you will make more per hour than any other job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this goes right back to my whole thing. What was the last thing I needed? I needed the pipe to my sprinkler system in my front yard sprung a leak. And that means we got a cut and sweat pipe, something I'm terrible at.
Yeah.
And then while I'm going to do that, I want the shutoff valves under my sink done. And you've met me. I'm not small. So getting underneath the sink is very difficult for me.
Yeah.
So I hired it. That guy, I know he charged me twice as much as it would have been if I could have shopped it around, but he was here the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was here for an hour. That was it, because he's an expert. And I paid the premium because that's what I wanted. I wanted someone to come in. So I would challenge somebody who's saying, I don't want all these small businesses. Well, of course you don't, but it's also a niche market. And if you get a couple of guys who are new, like you got a couple of apprentices, man, you could send them out to do the work. And now someone else is making money for you. Like that's what's called a niche market. Why would you turn your back on it? And if you get really good at it, I mean, how many new homeowners would need work? How many people are going out and buying their first home? How many people are moving around, especially now with everything, the aftermath of COVID, and people are now moving out to these rural houses? Man, you're sitting on a gold mine.
Oh yeah, for sure. And sitting on a gold mine, but only if you're even in a place to receive all of that work, because so many people are going to where they can see and like qualify you and see what you do.
Totally.
Yeah. So being online, it's insane. And
being online, mastering, I mean, self-development, any type of business development is going to start with you. So let's think of all the arts and crafts that have to go into that. Like you're going to need an evening routine to set you up for the morning. You're going to need a morning routine to get you ready to go.
Yeah.
Right. If you're rolling out of bed, slamming a Red Bull and going out the door, I'm sorry, but your time in the trade is going to be shorter than the guy who gets up, works out, and eats clean.
Yep. Well, I mean, there's even that where I've been working out pretty consistently for 6 years or something like that. I regularly have people tell me, well, why do you do that? You're doing a manual job, it's going to be too hard for you to continue doing that, year after year. And my response is always, well, I'm trying to be the best I can, not just good enough. You know what I mean? There's a point where doing all of this stuff makes you better, makes you a better man, makes you a better person, whatever, than just rolling out of bed and slamming a Red Bull, like you said, and getting going.
Well, and let's be real. I mean, I when I go back to Wisconsin, where I'm originally from, my whole family's still in Southeastern Wisconsin, right? And everyone that stayed in Southeastern Wisconsin's in the trades. And so I look at my elders, I look at the men who are in their 60s, they're all crippled, but except for like one of them. And what was the difference? What do you think the difference between that one is? Well, he did yoga in the morning because after his first divorce, he was like, well, where are the chicks? They're at the yoga studio. And then he fell in love with it. And then he realized that it made everything better. So he now like instructs yoga and stuff like that. And it sounds weird, but stop and think about it. You got this big muscled grizzled guy who does carpentry, who's doing yoga, but he's the only one who can bend over and tie his shoes anymore.
Yeah.
Like this is not a secret. And it's incredible to me because I get told the same thing of like, well, Dylan, like, you shouldn't lift so heavy. You're going to be crippled. Well, actually, I'm more limber now than I have been at any other time outside of high school.
Yeah.
I can sit and I'm concentrated on my job. I'm concentrated on my family. I can get on the floor and color with my girls, right? Like all of that stuff is unlocked, but it starts with you. It starts with making the choice to say, I'm going to invest in me. The
Hmm.
same thing is true with when you're starting a business. The yoga, the eating clean, the working out, that's the arts and crafts of the
Hmm.
business of your life. When you start a business, there's a whole other set of arts and crafts. Making
Hmm.
sure you've got your book straight, making sure you're invoicing, making sure you're prospecting, making sure your messaging's right. All of that thing, all of those things will make you last longer in every
Yep.
single aspect.
Yep. Well, my point is always, we have such a culture of, do the least amount possible. And it's like, if you have some sort of health problem, oh, you better cut back and not do certain things or certain movements or whatever, because you're going to hurt yourself. Or if you have a health, you hurt your back, oh yeah, you better not work out, because you're just going to have a messed up back forever. Or you have a manual job, you better get all the rest you can and not work out, because you're just going to end up hurting yourself. But I would counter and say, everybody I know that is later into their life, all of this exercise, this movement, this eating healthy, it helps you get stronger as a person, and it helps counteract all of the wear and tear that you're putting on your body. Most of the people that I know that are crippled stopped moving. They stopped
Bingo.
doing stuff. And so, like, I don't think it's as big of a problem to maybe always be exercising and be eating healthy, but it's definitely doesn't hurt you. And especially when you get to a point where you're retired, after having done all that stuff, you stop moving, it's like instant, you've aged 20 years at that point, because
Totally.
your body is so broken down and you haven't done anything to build it back up.
Totally.
Yeah.
My grandfather, I mean, he passed in his late 70s, but I mean, he was upright and walking and limber right up until the day the stroke took him away, right? And here's a guy who, his dad had him because they needed help on the farm. Like that was his motivation to have kids.
Oh, wow.
And so he got my grandpa being was a massive man. So was my
Mhm.
great grandfather. And people used to talk about him going up and down scaffolding was like watching a monkey, right? A
Yeah.
6'4" monster of a monkey.
Yeah.
And he used to tell me, I used to ask him, I'm like, why don't you have like a lazy boy? He says, well, because the second I sit down in that, I'm never getting back out of it.
Yeah.
And so on some levels, he knew that. And so he
Yeah.
never had the big comfy chairs because
Hmm.
he wanted to walk. And it was incredible to me watching him in his 70s get down on the floor to play with my children.
Hmm.
Right. And to be there and to be right down with him, for his great grandkids. But it had everything to do with the fact that he never stopped moving and never
Yep.
sat down in the big chair.
Yep. And it's this comfort that kills just about everything. I mean, you look at business, you look at your work, you look at anything in your life, a lot of most of the problems come from being down here in your comfort zone, whereas you should be out here growing and expanding. So I've been really on this kind of realization that nobody knows anything, um, especially when it comes to health and fitness. So, and this is especially coming down to manual labor jobs, and it's really frustrating to me when people say things like, you shouldn't do that because you'll hurt yourself, um, or you're doing too much, because the second you sit down and are just lazy on a couch, it's comfortable, it's dangerous, because what makes you want to get back up from that? And
Totally.
it obviously isn't a huge problem if you sit down every once in a while, but you start to get too comfortable, and then you start to do less, and you start to not want to stretch and grow and get stronger as a person. And then that's kind of where the development stops. And I think that's where I see a lot of aging progress, and that's where I see a lot of problems happen in businesses, where people aren't trying to keep up with times and expand their business, and they're just getting lazy and comfortable.
Totally. Wait a minute, it applies into money issues too, right?
Mm,
There is an ease that comes along with not having a budget and not actually having the
yeah.
conversation. The
Yeah.
problem is that it's going to atrophy. You
Hmm.
know, when you say money is emotional and a budget's a conversation, stop and think about somebody who's married. If you are not
Yeah.
budgeting with your partner, that relationship is becoming obese and sick. You are
Yeah.
not planning together. You're not sharing your values. You're not sharing a common vision.
Yep.
And particularly from men to women, you know, now the woman's afraid because you are dragging her through life blindfolded.
Hmm.
It's the same type of thing. I mean, and there's a huge difference between saying like, oh, I hurt my back deadlifting, so I'm gonna scale back a little bit. Like you shouldn't just go out there and throw 4 plates on and go
Yeah.
for it.
No, exactly. Yeah.
But there's a huge difference between I'm taking care of myself and rehabbing and I'm just relaxing on the couch. Same
Yep.
thing is true in money, same thing is true in business.
Yep.
And it's hard to distill your vision down. It's hard to communicate to people what you do. There's a
Hmm.
lot of self-confidence issues that are going to come up. And to not do it is to be in a state of decay.
Hmm.
You are
Yeah.
moving backwards. It's worse than standing still. You're moving backwards.
Yep. No, that's super important. Especially when bad things happen, I guess it's important to not like shrink back into this little hole and like lock up and not talk about problems. Like with the recession, I imagine that caused a lot of problems in people's marriages with money and all that sort of stuff because it really took a blow to their life and just made them not want to talk about anything. And I saw that happen
Totally.
with a few people, but yeah.
Totally. I mean, and that's true with a lot of things. And you know, I think the unfortunate part, you know, of a lot of it is people think that when they clam up and they're protecting themselves, that no one sees. Like they've convinced themselves in their head that everything's going to be okay and that this is the right course of action. And they're not fooling anybody.
Mhm.
You know, people can see somebody who's taking a step backwards, like you already pointed it out. I can see them age.
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
But in their head, they're not.
Yep.
Same thing is true with your money. Same thing is true with your business. Like
Mm.
we all know people who are in every aspect. You know, in my side on the accounting side, your side on the trades. Like we know people in the business where at one time they were just a lion of this realm,
Mm.
and they're not. They're decaying, and they still think they're cool, but everyone else kind of cringes when they come around. You know, like I'm sure you've
Yep.
got the guy who comes to your
Yep.
site and tells you all about this other. That was my
Oh
Uncle
my
Ralph,
gosh.
right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
tells you all about this stuff, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how cool they used to be, but they're not anymore because they
Yep.
stopped evolving.
Yep. Yeah, that's super important. It's like it's the name of the game in life, no matter what it is continuing to grow and evolve. Because if we don't, I honestly think that's comparable to dying. And we are dying, obviously. Everybody, I mean, everybody has a limited amount of time on here, but if we are not actively reaching and pushing our boundaries, I mean, you're just racing to die instead.
Totally. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the things with the trades that I think, and I've been hearing this more recently,
Mm.
is the idea like, oh, you know, Chat GPT is going to take all these office jobs, but the trades are going to be fine. Hey, man, who pays you?
Yeah.
You know, so if everyone loses their office job, the trades are going to be hurt too because it's going to be their customers.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of if this is going to happen. It's a question of what happens when it does.
Yeah.
And so you will see people lose their job in these office complexes, and that's
Mm.
going to impact the trades, right?
Mm.
Either people who are trying to reinvent themselves by coming into it, or people who can no longer afford those services.
Mm.
So if you're asking where is your risk here? Well, the risk is not getting a website, not getting social media,
Yeah.
not getting out there to establish yourself now.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an important point that I actually don't bring up all that often because we talk about where the trades are going and that they're not going to go away, and that's true in a way, but it's more like they're just going to become more valuable, because I think there's going to be a lot more people moving towards them, and if you're not working to establish yourself now, there's going to be a lot of people with probably a lot of resources and nothing better to do because their jobs are gone, and they're going to be using these tools where and getting a lot of work where you might not be from
Totally.
social media, websites, all that type of stuff.
Totally. And there's also the standpoint of, at what point, how much job loss due to automation can society bear before things
Yeah.
break and then we have to reconfigure. I mean, it is entirely possible that we can go through a phase in which we're reimagining how we live.
Yeah.
Suburban life is the most expensive way to do it. So what happens when we realize we can't do that anymore?
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Well, Dylan, it was an awesome conversation. Where can people go to find more about you? I know you mentioned your website, but
So you can find me. My name is Dylan Bain. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at Fiscally Savage. My website is fiscallysavage.com, where you can find all my free tools, schedule an appointment, and then, of course, my recommended reading list.
Yep. Yep. Great resource for helping with money management, which is something that everybody needs. So
fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Dylan. We'll be staying in touch. So
pleasure's been all mine.
Yep. All right.